the Tories and UKIP. Nigel Farage, the leader of the UKIP, has been very much in the news in relation to the Rotherham foster parent scandal, where children were taken away from foster parents simply because the parents were UKIP members. There's a bit of an outcry, a scandal over that. But it's also perhaps put the kibosh on any chance of a pact between UKIP and the Tories ahead of the next general election. Michael Fabricant, a senior Tory, has actually spoken about, in a secret internal report to the Prime Minister. Michael Fabricant suggested that offering an in-out referendum on UK membership of the EU would be vital to promise to get a deal with UKIP, in return for which UKIP would promise not to stand against Tory candidates in 2015. He pointed out in the document that it was very likely that UKIP candidates standing against Tories could see the Tories lose an extra 20 to 40 seats at the next election. In a tight general election, as most people expect it to be in 2015, that could be the difference between being in power and not being in power, with so many people going over to UKIP, now the third biggest party in British politics. So earlier today, I spoke to Nigel Farage and I asked him if he thought the Tories should do a deal with his party.
Well, I'm not quite sure what he's offering, really. He seems to think that if I'm offered a job in the next government, that UKIP will pack its tents and go home. Well, that's simply not going to happen. We're a different party with a different manifesto. And there is one major obstacle to any deal being done. Firstly, even if David Cameron did offer an in-out in the next manifesto, how on earth do we know that we could trust him, given that this is the man who once before, if you remember, offered a cast-iron guarantee and then didn't deliver? And the other problem is that on Saturday, we had the breaking scandal of these foster parents whose children were removed because they supported UKIP. Everybody from Ed Miller to Gove said this was unfair and wrong because UKIP was not a racist party, and David Cameron actually chose to more or less repeat the insult that he delivered against UKIP back in 2006 on LBC.
Is it personal then between you and David Cameron? That insult, of course, said to Nick Ferrari on breakfast that UKIP, a bunch of fruitcakes, loonies and closet racists mostly. Is it personal?
Well, yes, it is now, I must say. I would have thought that Saturday was the perfect opportunity for him to retract. And indeed, the Downing Street press office initially did say that Mr. Cameron didn't believe those things anymore, and then they retracted the retraction. It's a bit like the omnishambles, isn't it, from the thick of it? And yes, we feel very deeply insulted. How on earth could you sit round a table and do a deal of any kind with a man that is so consistently rude about you?
OK, so you don't trust David Cameron and you don't like David Cameron by the sounds of it. What if they offered a deal where they actually gave you a date? This is the day that we will hold a Euro referendum after 2015, signed in blood, as you had requested earlier this year. Would that be enough for you?
Well, that would clearly be the start for the basis of a negotiation. But as I say, given that the man that would be leading that negotiation has once again been abusive and rude about UKIP, it is very unlikely to see that happening. And we also know that Cameron himself is dead set against giving us a clear in-out referendum. So I think the real message to the Tories who feel Eurosceptic and who want a referendum, the real message to them is they've got two choices. Either they come and join us in UKIP, or they get rid of Cameron as leader.
Would a deal be easier if David Cameron was no longer leader?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, particularly after Saturday, when he's chose to be just so rude about us once again, I think it's very difficult to contemplate any situation in which we could sit round and do a deal with that man.
Given that Michael Fabricant has pointed out something which many political watchers would say was true, is that there is a threat to many Conservative seats, between 20 and 40 perhaps at the next election, from Tory voters defecting to UKIP. Would it actually be possible for UKIP to make that deal and still exist as a party?
Well, I mean, UKIP fulfills a very important role in British politics. We were the first people to talk honestly and openly about the European question, saying we want to be friends with Europe, but not membership of this union. We've helped to make that a mainstream party argument. We also are the party that's talked about immigration, again, I think responsibly and sensibly, and helped that. We were the first people to sound the alarm bells about the windmills going up all over this country at massive cost with very little benefit. You know, UKIP is a very effective campaigning political party. I don't think it's just going to pack its tents because Mr Cameron or somebody else promises a referendum.
The trouble you have, Nigel, is that as leader of UKIP, it's basically your job to do yourself out of a job as an MEP, and indeed as a leader of a party demanding a referendum. If you actually got what you wanted, there'd be no point having UKIP anymore at all.
Well, I absolutely agree that doing myself out of a job as an MEP is an absolute priority. But in terms of UK politics, I think UKIP is now a strongly established, fast-growing brand, and don't think, just because Britain left the European Union, that that's the end of UKIP. Yes, of course, we want to have a vote on who governs Britain, but we're also a party now putting forward a manifesto and a plan for how that Britain could be governed. We are the radical, fresh thinkers, and a lot of people vote for us, not just on the European question, but where we stand on other things too.
Finally, Nigel, you touched on this earlier regarding Rotherham Council and the UKIP members who had the foster children taken away from them. Rotherham Council has issued a statement today saying they'll be as open and transparent as possible while cooperating with an investigation ordered by the Education Secretary Michael Gove. Do you trust that we will see transparency?
This begins to sound to me like the kind of inquiry that's been set up just to kick the issue into the long grass. I want some immediate action. I want an apology to these people. I want their record cleared. They, for 7 years, have been successful foster people. They should be fully back on that register. Those 3 children who have been given a good, loving home and environment should be returned. And I think heads should roll within Rotherham Council for behaving as badly as they have.